Welcome into my craft room, friends. Today we're going to be making some beautiful vintage summer farmhouse DIY crafts using Dollar Tree supplies. I also have in this video a special technique that I want to share with all of you on how to make your very own vintage ribbon. Vintage ribbon is so expensive when you buy it from boutiques, and I'm going to show you how to get the look on a Dollar Tree budget. Now come along and let's make something beautiful for our homes. This project is so beautiful. We're going to be using a piece of wood plank from the Dollar Tree, some florals, and then this satin pink ribbon. Now we're going to work on a technique making a vintage ribbon on a budget, because this ribbon, when you buy vintage ribbon, is so expensive. What we're going to do is start with a satin ribbon, and we are going to completely soak it with water. Then, easy step, we're going to just crinkle it into the tightest little ball you can get and clamp it. Put it to the side to let it dry. We're going to come back to that technique in a couple of minutes. Now we're going to move on to the wood plank. I'm going to be painting mine white. You can stain yours wood. You can do whatever color you want. It's up to you. But I'm going to be going with a crisp white. It reminds me of a picket fence in the summertime for farmhouse style. I really love this style. I've painted it 2 coats of white paint, and I'm drying in between just to make sure I can speed up the process. Once it's completely dried, I'm going to take my sandpaper and I'm going to give it that vintage look by sanding down those corners. I'm just using a piece of sandpaper, and I'm going to rough it up around the edges, and then I'm going to come back in with a little bit of dry brushing with brown to give it a distressed look. I really am such a fan of using a brown dry brush effect because it just always makes it look so much more vintage. Now at this point, the ribbon is dry, but we're going to take it a step further, and this is where it's going to really start to look distressed. When you use a satin ribbon, there is a polyester component to it. And when you use your heat gun after you've let it dry and it's all wrinkled, you're going to keep your heat gun moving, and it's going to cause the sides. You're going to see it kind of shrivel up just a little bit on the sides. You can see it right there where it's shriveling up, and that is going to create that vintage look of the ribbon. This is the easiest technique, and this is how people make vintage ribbon and sell it for so much money. It's insane. The next step I'm going to recommend is to do a little bit of distressing. You can also do a tea stain on your ribbons where you just soak it in some tea, but I'm going to just use some dry brushing on the ribbon, and that's going to make it look more vintage. Now, another tip to use is these are specific colors that look really great with the vintage ribbon: a soft baby pink, a baby blue, a mint, a cream, a peach. Anything that's very pastel looking, that is a very common color for vintage ribbon. It's the easiest ribbon to make, and you'll save yourself tons of money doing these steps yourself. And I also recommend doing it in bulk, so that way you have a whole bunch of ribbon on hand and you can just pull from it whenever you need it. Now going back to our project, I am now going to clip a bunch of these little florals, ditzy tiny little flowers, and we're going to gather them together for a little bundle. I'm just placing them all pinched between my fingers. I want to have a little bit of a stem to it, but we don't want it to be too long because our plank of wood is not too long. Now I'm taking my twine, I'm just going to wrap it around a couple of times, tie a double knot, get that in place, and then I'm going to bring on my ribbon. Now I was debating whether I should glue on this bundle of flowers or staple them on, and you're going to see in a second I'm going to get my staple gun out and I'm going to staple it because I just found it would hold on there better. But I'm going to tie on that first little knot for my ribbon, push apart my florals, find a good spot that I can conceal that staple down in there, and then I stapled it to the wood. I'm going to readjust all my flowers again, and now I'm going to tie my vintage ribbon, which is not really vintage ribbon, it's just Dollar Tree ribbon, but we saved ourselves a ton of money. I'm going to tie that bow, let the tails be nice and long as you want it to be, play with it, and doesn't it look so incredibly old and vintage. I love this technique. I really hope you will try it. Now on the back side, I'm going to use this darling wood plank to hang up somewhere in my home. I'm going to tie a couple of knots on a stapled piece of twine on that wood. And then I'm going to thread on some of these wood beads. You can skip this part. I really wanted to hang up this piece, so that's why I'm doing it. I put on, I think, almost about 10 wooden beads. I'm going to staple the other side to the wood plank and then tie it into place, cut off those extra pieces, and you've got yourself a beautiful decor piece. I have been wanting to make these Pioneer wheels, you find them in the wreath section at the Dollar Tree, into a bike for like 2 years, ever since they came out at the Dollar Tree. We're going to be using these wired baskets, this galvanized circle, and actually I ended up ditching that, but I'm going to show you where I was thinking about using it, and then 2 of these mop broom handles from the Dollar Tree. This bike is so beautiful when it's done. Friends, it is so much fun to make. Now, I was going to use this galvanized circle right here, but I decided to ditch it because I liked how it was coming together without it. Now, how we are going to be working with these poles, I figured out the length that I wanted between the wheels of my bicycle. And now I'm going to use my hammer on one side, flip it over, hammer on the other side, and then we're going to bend that metal back and forth until it snaps. And it snaps pretty easy. If you have a hard time bending it, I recommend putting it on the floor where you've hammered it, and then just put your foot on it and pull it up on the sides. It'll bend real easy for you. And we are going to be breaking apart 4 pieces of metal from these rods from the broom handles. Now you can see I've got one long one between the bike wheels. I've got one long one where the handlebars are, another one between those 2 parts of the handle and the seat. So I've got my 4 pieces. Now what we're going to do is we're going to clean up these pieces of metal, because leaving that metal raw like that is not safe. I don't like making pieces like that. So I'm going to take my hammer. I hammered it down on the side to make sure it's flat. I'm going to take my needle nose pliers and I'm going to bend that metal under to keep it from being exposed and to cap it off. I'm going to use my hammer to keep getting it into place and keep pinching it until I get it nice and safe on the ends. And then you just keep crimping it down until, again, there's no exposed metal that anybody can get cut on. I'm going to do this to all of these poles. Don't forget to take off your stickers using your heat gun and your scraper. I'll link my tools all down below. And now this is probably the trickiest part, but honestly, friends, it was super easy. I'm using my drill and a piece of wood to drill into, and I'm going to drill 2 holes on each end of these pieces of wood. If you have a husband who has a drill, enlist his help. I'm sure he'll be happy to help, but I promise it wasn't hard to do it all for me. But I have been using a drill for a while in my craft room, so do what's comfortable for you. Now that I've got all of the holes, we're going to use zip ties, and we're going to zip tie this whole thing together. And that sounds a little flimsy, but I promise you, it is so sturdy and so strong. And these decor bike pieces, I saw one at HomeGoods the other day, and it was selling for almost $100. I laughed, because I knew I could make it way cheaper. So now I'm just taking my zip ties, I'm zip tying it onto the 2 wheels, and then I'm going to start coming up on those sides where the seat is, where the handles are, and I'm going to, again, just zip tie it. I'm using those holes that I drilled, and by the way, I did try to use my crocodile, but it was a little too thick for the Crop-A-Dile. I think just from all the layers of metal that are in there, that's why I use the drill. But if you can get your Crop-A-Dile to work, that's amazing. I couldn't. I really thought it would be really great if I could use the Crop-A-Dile, because then that would make it even easier, but it was a little too thick to go through. So you can see here, I'm pulling that zip tie as tight as I can together, and then I'm just zipping it in place. And I'm going to do that on all of the sides. I'm slowing it down here so that I can show everyone how easy this is to do. It just takes a few minutes to just zip tie it all together. Now at this point you can see all of the pieces really well. This piece is huge, by the way. When you see it at the very end, it's as wide as my fireplace in my craft room. It's huge. So that's why it's not all the way in the frame, because it is really hard to get this whole thing in the shot. But you can see that I've zip tied the 4 pieces together. Now once those are all zip tied and nice and secure in place, I'm going to zip tie on the baskets. Now my kids were like, Mom, how come there's a basket for the seat? It's because it's decor. And I wanted it to have a really cute basket in 2 places where you can have florals coming out. But if you wanted to come up with a seat, that is totally doable too. There's so many things at the Dollar Tree that you can turn into a seat. But now I have zip tied on my baskets, and I zip tied them at the top where those holes were, and then I secured it a little bit further down into the basket. I'm also securing a little bit more around the wheels and that joint in the middle. Then I took it outside and I spray painted it a slate gray. I loved the color of this gray. I thought it was really pretty, very vintage farmhouse. And we are now going to do some distressing. This is, again, up to you what you want to do, but I wanted to cover up some of those zip ties and the holes because I really wanted to make sure it looked finished and polished. And I'm going for a vintage summer look, so that's why I'm doing this. Now you saw I used my hot glue to fill in some of those holes, so that way you don't see the holes. And then bringing in some flour and some paint, brown paint, mix it together, clump it onto those spots where the zip ties are, and then add on some cinnamon. And this gives it a rusty summer vintage bike look. I let it all really dry, and then I dusted off some of the cinnamon. You'll see at the end the finished look with the cinnamon, the vintage distressing. Now inside the baskets, I am going to add in a piece of drop cloth and some foam. I took one of the foam squares from the Dollar Tree, I cut it in half, and I got a piece of drop cloth fabric, and I just cut that down to size. You can see here I'm putting it in the basket and I'm testing it to see how exactly I wanted it to look. I figured out that if I rounded the corners of this rectangle shape that's going to go inside the fabric, it kept it without the fabric poking out of the corners of the basket. So I trimmed down those sides, I rounded them. I added a little bit of glue to the bottom. I don't want it coming dripping out of the bottom of the basket. And I'm just tapping it around in there so that it really locks it in nicely. And to secure it so it doesn't come out, on the back side I added some glue so that it keeps it clean on the front side. Now at this point you're going to add in whatever greenery you want. I had this really pretty citrus, almost fern, that's trickling out the sides of these baskets. And then I came in with a lot of neutral cream florals. Make sure you add in your Spanish moss to disguise that foam, so that way you see florals and Spanish moss versus the foam. And then put in whatever florals you want. Friends, this project was so much fun. It has been on my crafting bucket list forever. Leave a comment down below if you have a project on your crafting bucket list that you have been wanting to make forever and you just haven't done it yet. I'm curious what your project might be. This was definitely one of my top 5. Anyway, at the end I added a beautiful ribbon to the bottom of the basket where the handlebars should be. And that's it. We completed the look and I checked something off my crafter's bucket list. This project is so easy, and it's such a great one for new beginners that are crafters wanting to try something out. I'm going to be using this wooden box from the Dollar Tree, some fabric, and some stamps that I got from the Dollar Tree. Start by taking your fabric and your box and trace out the size that you would need for your fabric. I'm using this blue and white ticking stripe fabric, and to mute the blue, I'm using the back side of the fabric. The front side of the ticking stripe fabric is a little bit brighter, and I get this fabric from Hobby Lobby, and they have it in all different colors, which is really fun. Go ahead and glue that down onto your box, pressing the glue and the wood together. It helps it bond and it helps it glue nicely. Go all the way around those edges, and then we're going to move on to the drop cloth fabric. And I get this from Home Goods, Lowe's. You can get it in whatever home improvement store you have around you. You can also get this kind of fabric too at Hobby Lobby. I ripped the sides so I can make it look nice and tattered and vintage and worn, you know, that farmhouse style. And then I glued it into place. Now this is the fun part. We're going to use the stamps from the Dollar Tree. I like to use Crayola markers because you can use all sorts of colors, but I'm just going to be using this brown for today. And I'm going to stamp on Home Sweet Home with these stamps. Here is a tip with these stamps. If you haven't heard me say them before, the Dollar Tree stamps always have a slick film on them. So you always have to sand them with sandpaper. That's right, sandpaper. It sounds crazy, but it really does work. Sand your stamps with sandpaper, and then they stamp beautifully. The ink sticks to the stamp, and you get a nice clean image. Once I was done stamping everything, I felt like I wanted to add a little bit more to this, so I got these little wooden beads from the Dollar Tree. I'm adding a dollop of wood glue inside the circle, and then hot glue around the edge, and then I'm just going to glue it right on, 4 on the bottom to create some little feet. I had so much fun making these 3 projects today. I hope you will give some of them a try, especially the vintage ribbon. It is such a money-saving technique. Friends, whatever it is that's on your bucket list to make in your craft room, or something that is new that you want to try out, I hope you get a chance to be in your craft room today and you get to make something beautiful for your home. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It always helps out my channel. And I'm going to recommend this video right here, just in case you missed it the other day. Thanks so much for being here. And until the next episode, bye friends.